Hello and welcome to yet another moving and reading vlog, although I think the moving part is going to be a bit more tangible in this one because as you can see I am sitting in an actual room with some shelves that aren't on wheels behind me, so we're getting ever closer. But as for what I'm reading to start this vlog off, I have just started my reread of the saga volumes of 1 to 9. I loved this. On my first read I gave it 4 stars. On the second I gave it 5 because the art style is just so good. This is about two characters from a warring planet and a warring moon. They both get together because they're soldiers from either side and they kind of have interaction based on those backstories, but then they elope from the war, they have a child, and they're trying to raise her on the run from different factions that want to track them down, kill them, and use the child for political gains. So I think this is an incredible story of family and sacrifice, but it also is quite funny at times, very beautiful in others, and confronting in a very specific way that's kind of gruesome, gross, and kind of mildly hilarious at times. There's a massive one-page spread of a alien's genitalia. I don't know if it's this volume, maybe it's volume 2, which I'm currently reading. I forgot it was in there, and when I read it I was like, oh boy. So as much as it is confronting in a way, it's also such a riot to reread because these characters have such little time to be set up because there's obviously different characters in it. Like there's the main characters and Hazel, who is the daughter, or I guess the baby. She grows throughout the series, as you'd imagine, but she is narrating it in a reflective way. So you get her kind of descriptions on the side and then the panels and the dialogue in the middle. So it's interesting to kind of look at her foreshadowing and her descriptions and her understanding of what's going on, whereas the characters in the moment might not realize what obviously is about to happen, or the ramifications of the advice they've just given or who they've just spoken to and what will happen with them later. So it's really cool to piece all the stuff together, especially on a reread, because it's so beautiful and so intentional, and I love the storytelling. The storytelling and the art are just beautiful, and I'm really enjoying myself. Enjoying myself might be mildly masochistic given how we're positioned to be emotionally torn up with the characters in this book, on this series, but I don't care, I love it so much. And then I am also listening to an audiobook that I cannot get out of my head, and that is Silver Under Nightfall by Rin Chapeko, and this is the same author that wrote the Bone Witch saga, but I did not like the sequels to that. I kind of fell out of love with it, even though I liked the general concept of like witches and necromancy. It seemed cool, but I think this series is way more up my alley, and this follows our main character Remy Prendergast. I really suck at saying names if I listen to the audiobook, and Remy is a vampire hunter, and obviously there are different courts of vampires in here, and the vampires and the humans are kind of trying to put this alliance together, but not every court agrees with it, and so you get those politics, but also Remy's interaction with vampires at like a human and a noble level. So it's really intriguing to see him go off with, I keep thinking of Zayn Malik, and that's not right. Zidane Malik. I feel like my editing self will put his name in because I'm getting it wrong. And then again, I'm useless with names. Zhao, them. They're two high court vampires. And this is very much a story of Remy trying to enact revenge against the Night Court because they murdered his mother, and his father is an abusive crock of bleep. And so he's trying to figure himself out. He's 23, I think, or early 20s, and he kind of falls into alignment with these two nobles because they have aligned goals, but they also realize the abuse he is in and try and help pull him out of it. And I really like that low-key storyline that's coming more to a head the further you read. And it's obvious to the reader what is happening, but not so much Remy, and he's realizing it later. And so I like that this is becoming like a male-female male polyamory romance, because as far as I'm concerned, do away with love triangles. Put everyone into polygamy. It's much happier with everybody, and you know, open communication, that is the key to this story, and it's absolutely amazing. Also, there was a moment where there was a rainbow in this story, and it is really just, it was very satisfying. If you know, you know. But this story is quickly becoming a book that I really like. Also, I didn't really describe the plot because I'm very excited and rambly. The plot is essentially these two noble vampires are realizing that there is a spreading disease called the rot, and this rot is infecting vampires and effectively turning them into zombie-like mutations. And those mutations are murdering and rampaging, and there is no way to kill them because they keep regenerating. So they're trying to stop that rot from happening because it's kind of like a engineered conspiracy in politics, and Remy kind of gets brought alongside that by mistake, and he joins them to try and stop the rot from becoming a thing, and along the way he wants to try and get revenge for, or avenge his mother's murder. So that's all wrapped up together, and I love the characters so far. And when I was reading this, I thought this surely can't be a standalone, and I'm pretty sure it's a series. I'm very excited. I really like it. I think I'm probably going to give it 5 stars depending on the ending, because I can't stop thinking about polyamorous vampires, and I'm just like, I'll be washing dishes or be painting a house, and I'm like, I wonder what Remy's doing right now. Remy's not real. A book hasn't done this to me in a very long time. I'm not used to this. We also finished our front room, so we have this tiny filming setup, Saga on the floor, which I'm reading. Still a workstation. Let's pretend that is not there. Temporary, and then the switch and the TV, which is temporary as well. So I can't wait to actually get that fireplace going. But the floors have all been steam cleaned, which is very nice. And we are going to be working on the back end of the house and hopefully living in the front, because that's been it's been the whole thing that we wanted to do and we haven't been able to. You actually might not believe this because we were very angry and very baffled, but we steam cleaned this room, right? And then Dave was steam cleaning the master bedroom, which we need to get done before we move a bed in. And the steam cleaner that we rented broke its own pump. So we couldn't finish steam cleaning the bedroom. And to be honest, it just feels like the universe saying that we're never going to be able to sleep in that bedroom of the house, because it's constantly been us not being able to sleep in it. Like, we got the keys to this place on September 9th and it is now October 17th. It has taken a while and it is still going, but at least now I can start moving some of my books over because we've got the front room done. It is now the next day. I have literally just finished work, gotten out of my car in my driveway, walked in and sat down to film this because I had 10 minutes left of my audiobook and I just sat in my driveway and listened to it. I'm going to absolutely give this book 5 stars, because even though I saw a few pieces of the facets of the plot coming, I don't care, because all of these characters, I would die for them. I love them so much. And even before, in my previous clip, I was like, Remy's not real. All of these characters to me, even the side characters, not just the love interests, all of them had their own arc, their own development, their own backstory, their own challenges, I suppose I could call it. And I honestly just love the communication in this, because one of my massive gripes about reading any book is miscommunication to drive the plot. And while it is realistic to understand that characters won't know everything all the time and also won't convey everything that they're thinking all the time, there is a time and place to try, at least, to have conversations. And I feel like that happened consistently throughout this book. So there are some things that still need to be discussed, I think. But for the most part, everything was actually brought to the character's attention in a very mature way and a very realistic way that became true to character, because Remy is such an angry character with not very high self-esteem and a lot of self-doubt, but he also recognizes certain things based on what the other characters have told him. And I like that one of the love interests, I'm never going to get their names right, I'm so sorry. She is very bright and bubbly, but it was never annoying. And actually one of the things that she did almost made me cry. And Zidane Malik was the type of brooding character that I remember loving that style of, but this was a non-toxic version. And he was absolutely amazing. Obviously, because he's such an old vampire, he's got a lot of baggage, but the way that he interacts and handles that, it makes his aloofness seem comprehensible, whereas with Remy, his broodiness is not as cold and standoffish as Zidane is, but it's still you know, quite fiery and angry. So I think they're all very different characters that are all balanced incredibly well by each other. And I think that's why I love them so much. But anyway, now I don't have an audiobook to listen to anymore, and I have a whole week of work ahead of me with a commute. So I'm probably going to pick up another one, and that would most likely be A Closed and Common Orbit by Becky Chambers, which is the second book in her Wayfarers series. I recently read and reviewed and loved the first book, so check out my review if you haven't yet, because I will link it for you. I'm really loving my reread, so I can't wait to get into Orbit as well. And then yeah, physically I'm still reading Saga. You can see that I've put it down halfway through on the shelf behind me. Again, I've just been a little bit busy, but that's okay. So I'm looking forward to continuing my reads. I've got a dancing class tonight, I've got an exercise class tomorrow night, and then maybe house stuff because we've still got to steam clean that bedroom because of course the steam cleaner died. We've got a weekend that's packed to the absolute rafters. So the fact that I've got some shorter books on my TBR I think will be beneficial for me because I won't have a lot of windows of time to read, but if I can finish a short book in those windows, that would be awesome. So that is my aim, but I'm just happy that I finished a book that became 5 stars. It was not even a book that I knew about. So my friend Marie is amazing because we often have the same reading taste, and I'm so glad this recommendation worked out. It's definitely one of my new favorites, and I'm so sad that I think it's a new release for this year because I don't have anything to continue on with in that series yet.
I have a temporary setup for my computer and for my editing and everything, and I cannot explain to you how relieving this is. I've been waiting for this for more than 3 years. And then we got the keys on the 9th of September, so it has always been within reach, but it's now just been over a month and it's finally happened. Also, we've got this thing, which is the monstrosity of a steam cleaner. All of the cords are inside here, and hopefully this is the first step in our journey to getting an actual bed in this house.
It is now Tuesday, and it has just been completely nuts, which I expected. Yesterday night we got my bed and a bed frame, so the bed frame is completely dismantled, but now at least we're sleeping on a double bed mattress, which means we're not sleeping almost on the floor on foam single mattresses anymore, so we're going a step up in the sleeping world, which I am super grateful for. And I've also managed to read some of this. I now have 20 pages left, but I do not have time to read them right now because I'm filming this, opening some packages that I've got here, and then I'm driving off to meet Dave for dinner at his parents', and then we are going to a dancing class, and then tomorrow after work we've got our workout class, so maybe between now and then I can get some reading in. I mean, it's only 20 pages, so you'd think I could. So I'm gonna try and finish this because I want to sneak it into October. I don't want to carry it over into November because I've got a whole reading plan for November and this does not fit into there, so I need to finish this ASAP. Plus it'll help with my Booktuber's Favourite Books reading vlog because this is one of Daniel Green's favourites. I'm thinking so far that this is probably like a 4 stars to me, and that's me being generous because Malice was a 3 stars I think, but this is improved on the writing style of Malice, but I still don't entirely love the writing style. To me personally it just doesn't have that kind of spark, but I am liking what the story is building. I'm interested in most of the characters. Okra is not really, no, is it Orca? I think it's Orca, kind of like the whale. That's how I'm associating it in my head. Orca is not really a character that I'm interested in, mostly because she kills people first and asks questions later, and that can be interesting and edgy, but it's just annoying for this character. There is a lot of gratuitous violence in here, so if you don't like blood and gore, don't read this because it's a very Viking and battle inspired. But while I say that about Orca, I do like the overall battles and action sequences described in here because it's very visceral and visual, and I like that aspect of it. And I'm also enjoying the whole tainted thing with the characters in here kind of having that link to the old gods of this world, and so they've got their blood in them in some aspects, so they can kind of partly shift into these feral creatures and kind of maintain some humanoid aspects as well. It's dark, it's intriguing, it's action-packed, and the action is really going down now, which is why I really want to finish those last 20 pages because we just had an Orca chapter and I'm like, I don't care, I want to read about other stuff because other stuff is way more interesting to me than her. So I've just read and finished her chapter and I'm into somebody else now, and I'm like, ooh, things are getting intense, and obviously the book is just about to end. So will I pick up the sequel? Honestly, I probably I don't know. I probably won't. I thought I might, but I probably won't. Who knows at this point? But now I should digress and open some packages. We have volume 10 of Saga and I am super stoked to read this. I've still got volume 2 here that I'm currently reading and I haven't caught up on this series. I'm hoping that I can do that before October finishes because that was my plan, to read all of Saga again and then read the next volume. So this might just creep into my November TBR, but given that they're short, I'm hoping I can squeeze them into October. And then the 2 other books are new releases that I'm hyped for. The first one is The Atlas Paradox, which is the sequel to The Atlas 6 that came out earlier this year. This is a dark academia urban fantasy following 5 or 6 different characters going to this school where there is a toll paid by the students who attend. It's a dark toll and all of these characters are for the most part likable, but there are faults, significant faults to each one, and so I really like the dynamics that are coming to a head when these characters are pitted with and against each other and forming different alliances. And while I kind of saw a few things coming in the Atlas 6, I didn't really care because I like the way that these are potentially going to continue and pan out and interweave, and I'm really excited to read this. I think it's a trilogy. I don't know if it's a duology, but either way I'm continuing a series, which is what I'm intending to do this month, or maybe early November. Hopefully this month, but probably November, let's be realistic. And then the last book in here I can probably read in November, given that it's a graphic novel, and it is the 3rd volume of Lore Olympus, which I am absolutely obsessed with. Hades and Persephone retelling set in the modern day. It started as a webcomic by Rachel Smythe, and it's continued into published volumes, so I'm trying not to look at the webcomic online because it is way ahead of the published volumes and I want to have some content to keep me going. 3 volumes have come out this year, so it's publishing pretty rapidly. I'm really just looking forward to reading this next. I have been anticipating these. They were supposed to come out about 2 weeks ago, and the pre-orders I made didn't ship until on or just after publication date, so it's pushed all of my reading back. But I've been pretty slow anyway. Like I said, I've still got Shadow of the Gods to go, so I'm kind of glad that everything is timing up because I'll probably finish Shadow, finish my reread of Saga, read the new volume of Saga, read Lore Olympus, and then dive straight into the Atlas Paradox. So I've got a few things reading wise on my list to do, which I'm really keen to get into. So with that update, I'm gonna leave you because I've got to dash and go off to a dancing class. I'm coming to you from the floor on Thursday the 27th of October to inform you that I feel very chaotic. However, we have thankfully finally got a bed, which is amazing. So we've been sleeping like real people again, and I also have some reading updates to give you. So the good news is I have just, well, it's technically all good news, I suppose. The good news is, for starters, I finished Shadow of the Gods, finally, and I'm giving this 4 stars. When I was reading the book, it went up from 4 to 3.5 to 4 again at different varying points, and there are 3 perspectives and I only really love one of them. One of them I don't really like that much and the other one is kind of lukewarm. So based on those feelings of what the book made me feel and me comparing it stylistically and technically to his previous work Malice, I enjoyed this more. I finished this one and I'm intrigued by the characters. I respect and I'm intrigued and interested in the world building. I like the different twists in here, although some of them I did kind of predict because you can see the foundations, and I don't mind necessarily seeing where a story is going, but if you bring me to that point and that's it, that's where I get a little bit disappointed. It's when you bring me to that point of where I expect it and then there's a twist after that twist, that's where all of the stuff hits the fan, and that's when I'm most interested. And there was a great, last sentence in here, and that was interesting enough, but it didn't feel like it warranted all of the build-up that the book took to get there. So I did like it, and I don't think at this point I'm going to continue. Maybe if I eventually have a spare credit for an audiobook, but it's honestly not going to be a priority at all. But I am really happy that I finally read this. It took me long enough, but we got there. And then, like I said before, I feel very chaotic because I did not tell you that I started Gearbreakers, which is a young adult sci-fi dystopia, and it follows 2 girls. I think they're both teenagers like 17, 18. It is sapphic, so I'm expecting them to eventually meet and become love interests. But the way that this story works is that when particular characters in Godolia get to a certain age, they go through this surgery, and from that surgery they become part cyborg, part human, and then they get kind of hooked up literally to these giant mechs, and these giant mechs fight in a war against, I don't know, another planet, another country, it's not really clear. And then the gear breakers are kind of like the rebels, and they sneak into these massive machines, these massive mechs, and they break little bits and pieces of them as rebels against the war. So I don't know really what the story is necessarily going to entail in terms of the politics, but when I was starting it, it felt kind of jarring because everything was, well, you kind of got thrown in, and usually I like that, but this felt kind of not a mess because it was, you know, logical and you could follow it, but I don't know, maybe I just wasn't interested, and I think that's why I have been umming and ahhing about picking it up and returning to it. I've been reading it on ebook from my library, and so because I got it as a library book, I don't feel bad about DNFing it. So I have just put it down and I've read a couple of chapters to kind of see if the tone would change, but I just don't think it's for me. So that's why I put it down. And then today, another chaotic thing, I started the Southern Book Club's I started the Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires. Third time saying that title, I got it right. And this just hooked me. I have seen this floating around and talked about, and I thought this is such a hyped book that I don't want to go out and purchase it, but I do want to give it at least a bit of a try. And I read the prologue and it just absolutely sucked me in. No pun intended. This has been a very kind of Halloween book, and it's about these women, like these housewives, I suppose, that are in the late 80s, early 90s, and they start this book club together and they read true crime. And because they're reading true crime, they kind of get wind of some odd happenings in their town and they start investigating themselves. And it follows the women of the children who are protected by their mothers, to the point where the mothers just take things on the chin to protect their families and to kind of be kosher and fit in with everybody else. And because they're Southerners, they're considered very polite. So you get that kind of housewife vibe from all of them, which is sometimes what they put on as a front to what they're actually thinking and actually feeling and doing. And obviously all of them had professions before they had children, so it's not just like they're in this little box, but that's how they are perceived. So it's a great narrative in terms of what it's representing and the themes it's going for. And I really like the fact that there is literally vampires that are going to be in the story. I've heard it's actually supernatural, like it's not just implied, it's actually a thing. So I'm really looking forward to seeing how that eventuates, because even though the writing style is quite simplistic and to the point and really easy to understand, it's just really easy for me to latch onto and snap up because it's presented in such a clear way. And sometimes some of the humour might go over your head because it's just being very blasé, but it's doing that in a very dry humour kind of way, and that's a humour that I really like. So I'm enjoying myself. Probably the prologue is a 5 stars, and at the moment it's like a 4, 4.5. So depending on how the plot goes, obviously, and how I feel, it might end up being pretty highly rated, and I really hope that is the case.
I am going to wrap this vlog up soon, but I had to capture the fact that for the first time ever we are carving pumpkins because Dave loved Halloween and he has hollowed out my pumpkin for me. So it is all prepared. I just don't know what to draw on it. Have you got a picture on yours?
I just Google image searched and I found something like that, which looks pretty cool.
Oh, angry pumpkin.
I don't want to reinvent the wheel here. I just need to get this. It's more of a chore now. Halloween's like 3 days away and we haven't done anything.
But we're putting in the effort now and that's what counts. So
Yeah.
I guess that's what our afternoon is going to look like. These are our pumpkins. We have a 10 out of 10 spook and a 10 out of 10 cute. And I learned the hard way that doing curved lines was very difficult. Dave looks just like Jack Skellington. It's so cool.
It is wild to me that even though we live in Australia, last night for Halloween we had door knockers constantly for hours. We actually ran out of chocolate, so I feel really bad that we ran out, but now we are prepared for next year. It's our first year living here, so I think that's acceptable. But I wanted to come in and officially wrap up this reading vlog. So really my pride and joy for this vlog was finishing Shadow of the Gods. But I have made some progress and I've read a whole bunch of volumes of Saga as well, which I'm also pleased with. I wish I did get time to read all of them, but that is not the case. I am still currently on volume 6 and I'm aiming to have these finished, but it's now the 1st of November. So I'm also thinking and starting to think about my unhaul challenge, which is read it and unhaul it. So if you look at my November TBR, I've got a whole bunch of stuff on there. I'm trying to clear out my TBR cart behind me and start 2023 as fresh as I can. So really that's the goal, but I do have a few loose ends and I'm thinking of just putting them into a couple of vlogs and then like washing my hands of it, I suppose, because they've kind of loomed over me for the year. So I'm also, speaking of looming over me, I'm still reading a few things. So the Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires, I'm about 25% into that, and I tend to really commit to reading ebooks and then I just completely forget about them because they're not physically there to remind me, which is why this one's taking me a while, but I am liking it. So it's not like I'm avoiding it because I feel like I need a DNF it. I'm enjoying it, so when I have a quiet moment, which is very few and far between lately, I will pick it up and finish it off because it's a library book and I only have it for 21 days and I feel like that time is really rapidly approaching for me to return it, and I don't want to return it unread. So that one I'm still going with, and then A Closed and Common Orbit I'm still listening to as well, but I've just been so tired that I've liked driving home and to work in silence, which means that you're really stressed. If you've got to just decompress in your car, I'm like, oh, I must be overworked. So I'm going to try and listen to it a little bit more this coming week, but I don't think I'm going to finish it this week. I've got 4.5 hours left of that one as well. So those are the two that I'm still currently reading. I'm just happy that I finished Shadow of the Gods and I've made some progress on Saga because I started volume 2 and then I didn't read it for a while. And I'm loving Saga. It is very packed with lots of characters and story, but at no point do I feel overwhelmed. It does do its version of, you know when horror does this jump scare? It does its version of it in the sense of here is a graphic thing, or here is an intense plot twist, or here is a statement that I'm trying to make and then I'll explain it afterwards. And I like that. It makes me feel like it's done a mini plot twist, I suppose, and it keeps me hooked, even though the art is enough to keep me hooked anyway. So I'm loving the way that this story is developing, and I realized I forgot so much about it because it's so detailed, and especially rereading it, you get to see all of Hazel's reflections and narrations, and I know what's coming. So a lot of the stuff that she's saying, it really just sinks in a little bit deeper. Not that it didn't sink in deeper the first time, but it's sinking in even more deeply the second. So I'm really enjoying myself on my reread, and I'm hoping to sit down today and smash out the rest, aside from editing this vlog, which I'm going to go and do now. So that is it for my reading vlog. I read a bunch of graphic novels, I've started some stuff, and I finally finished Shadow of the Gods, which I'm considering a success. I'm now just over 60 books read for this year, and I wanted to get to 60, which I'm happy with. So maybe, can I get to 70? Do I push myself? No, I'm thinking I'm going to be doing a bunch of DNFs coming up this month, so I don't want to go, oh, I'm going to hit 70 and then DNF like 6 of them. Which wouldn't be good. So that is it for my reading vlog. I'm finally going to wrap this up. Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it. Come and chat to me down below in the comments. Let me know what you're currently reading, or if you have a lot left on your TBR for the end of the year, and I will talk to you in my next video. Bye.